We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
Do we need another video conferencing platform? If you're watching the video, you can see some great faces right now.
Nobody is going to use this thing. It's internal. It's a vanity project, and just because we're doing it because we can. And I see certainly no commercial or personal application.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but...
Coming up on AVWeek, do we really need another video conferencing platform? Because X wants to compete with Teams and Zoom. We're going to talk about AV over IP for paging, intercoms, and other emergency systems. I ask you, should everything be on the network? CEDIA and CI Expo are running this week. The guests and I chat about trade shows, and if you're missing out, if you're not there. All that and more coming up on AVWeek. Welcome to AVWeek for September 6, 2024. I'm Patrick Norton. Your beloved Tim, well, he's in CEDIA, wherever that is, and whatever residential is doing. He's going to talk about that next week. But we have an amazing panel for you today. And, I'm Patrick Norton. Did I mention that? I'm going to be hosting in his place. Brock McGinnis, Nationwide Audiovisual in Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, Patrick.
Welcome to the show. And I should warn everyone, it is a very northeastern kind of vibe today. Heather Sidorowicz, Southtown Audio and Video. She's located in Western New York State. Did I mention there's a northeast vibe going on? And
hey.
Welcome to the show. George Tucker, Corporate Audiovisual Services. He's in Elmsford, New York today. They do a lot of work out of Manhattan, which I think completes, Heather, I think you called it the Northeastern Triangle earlier in the show.
I did, like the Bermuda Triangle, but way more fun.
I don't think I've ever noticed a regional blend on the show before.
Well, while Tim's away, the mice will play.
Especially the Canadian mice. Ontario, sneaking in on the New York action.
It's the AV takeover.
Oh, my goodness. I will try not to lose the fort in Tim's absence. That is we're going to talk about X. You might still think of it as Twitter. You might still think of it as a place where fascinating things happen on an irregular basis for reasons no one understands.
You'd be incorrect.
Outside of the man that makes the cyber trucks. AV Interactive had a pretty big article this week talking about X, not just as a video distribution platform, but as a video conferencing platform. They hosted a meeting. Things will be happening. And this is a classic question that Tim would ask if he was here. Do we need another video conferencing platform? Aren't we all still cleaning up the mess for the clients that insisted on blue jeans? Wow. If you're watching the video, you can see some great faces right now, especially from Heather. Here's a question. What's the impact of the new player? And is anybody comfortable with X/Twitter? I should point out I am the irregular irritant for any of a number of friends and business associates when they're like, Google's doing this. And I'm like, great, go to killedbygoogle.com, which is the incredible list of every product that Google has killed after launching it, often in the early days after me or some of my close friends had integrated it into something that was feeding our children. So I am a little conservative when it comes to adopting new platforms or new products from sketchy platforms.
Data mining platforms.
I'm still morning reader.
Oh my goodness. I think we're all morning reader at some level. Brock, Heather, George, who's ready to integrate whatever this turns out to be from X?
Nobody is going to use this thing. It's internal. It's a vanity project, and just because we're doing it because we can. And I see certainly no commercial or personal application for another platform hosted on X.
I was going to say, I really struggled with this question because like some people, I was an early adopter of Twitter. I was there a year or two after it came out and established some of the first AV communities on Twitter with a bunch of people. It was AV Tweeps. So when I worked for a major manufacturer of control systems. I still apply to my NDA there. We wanted that outreach. So I struggled hard because I've really fallen hard when it went south, or as I view it, it went south in a way that I didn't like, and I've abandoned it for 2 years now. I'm on Threads, I'm on Blue Sky, the whole bit. So the question was, like, is there anything new here that would give me an advantage by using a Twitter video conferencing platform?
Hell no.
Like, if it were 8 years ago and I had a strong user base and a strong community base, I could see that being something of value. I mean, what they've given you, as Brock said, we can make sure that nobody gets in you don't want. Yeah, okay. So could Zoom 10 years ago? You know, I mean, what are we looking at here, and why would this be a big announcement other than I need to swing a product around to make some investor happy for a few minutes and pump up a stock price for a day because that's a value to me? I just could not find an inherent value.
I agree. And then when I did a quick search of like how many major companies are actually using something like Outlook, Office 365,
Sure.
You know, 80, I think it was 70 to 85% of companies are using 365, and that's increasing almost all the time with cloud-based services. So something that they've already built into. I mean, I can't tell you through the pandemic and still today, being on those commercial front lines, going and meeting with end users about what video conferencing technology can work for them. How many don't even understand that they already have that? They're already paying for something like Teams. So maybe they're paying for Teams, but they really want Zoom. Those are the only two they really even know exist. Again, as someone every single day who's out there on the front lines dealing with the end user, that's it. They know Teams, they know Zoom. That's it. And they're certainly not, no one's ever in my history ever said, I'm looking for a new exciting video conferencing platform, or asked which one they should go with. They already are locked in. So yeah, this is a hard pass.
I just want to thank everyone for being alarmingly fair and not even getting harsh on that one. Because there were so many opportunities. I'll be the snarky one and kind of follow up on something that Brock might have hinted at, which is, you know, any platform where the primary owner will get angry that a tweet was beaten by the President of the United States, calling their engineering team and reassign them to thumb the scales in their favor. I'm just not feeling any level of stability I want near my business when I look at something like that. Call me conservative, you'd be the first. But yeah, I can't even imagine who would adopt this. As somebody at one point during the pandemic had 7 different video conferencing clients to deal with some of my freelance work, 2 of which exist today in any meaningful fashion.
I was going to say, were there ever 7?
Well, it depends on what you consider a video conferencing client. There were 7 different tools I had people using. I could probably list them out. Blue Jeans was the weirdest because somebody...
That was the weirdest, yeah.
Well, it integrated a certain audio technology from a certain audio vendor I will not call out. And that's why their entire company used it. It was an experience. I'll just leave it at that one.
You know what the world really needs is another form of string cheese. That's really the way I look at it this way. It's like, we're desperate for another version of string cheese. We are.
Oh, you know, you can drop by the right truck stop in the middle of America and you'll find out there's more flavors of string cheese and opportunities. Yeah, sriracha string cheese. Let's not go there. Let us bring this back to AV technology. Story up on Rave Publications. Enhancing communication and safety by leveraging IP-based paging and intercom systems, which is a little more exciting than I make that sound when I read that. A lot of drilling went down, a lot of kind of drilling down on that article by Randall Lee and the Rave team is essentially... what happens to the network, what happens to the AV, or in their very provocative title, what actually happens to the really critical stuff in which when the world is falling apart, we do not want it to fail. What happens when we put everything on the network?
Well, I mean, I think that it depends on where you're looking, the perspective that you're looking at from. I mean, conceptually, right, the idea of maybe I don't need power for RAN for something, or, you know, at CEDIA, Sonos just announced that they're having IP speakers. We've seen IP speakers from others over the last few years as well. I don't feel that that's something that's caught on, at least in my neck of the woods. completely. It's not something that it's something that's existing, and I still think in the beginning phases of that. From the actual IT side or standpoint, I'm not going to chime in on that because it's not my area of expertise. But I mean, you have something that's very robust and tried and true. Speaker wire back to a speaker, back to an amplifier, and I guarantee you I could go out in a stone's throw away. I could probably find one of those systems that are still working from the 80s.
Sure.
So those things are still working. They work forever. When you go into a system and somebody has it from 10 years ago, what you don't usually need to replace is those insulin speakers and the speaker wire. So you have something very robust in that sense of like it's bulletproof in some ways, and it's hard to and show me any computer from that long ago that's still working. So there's that's where I'm going.
I have a friend who's a battalion chief. He runs a whole bunch of firefighters. He leads that group. And somebody was like essentially intimating in a slightly intoxicated conversation that what fire trucks needed was technology. And I think his laugh could be heard across 3 states, which is impressive because we were in the middle of Colorado at the time. And he's like, no, what I need is Stone Age technology that never fails because, you see, I'm fighting fires, sometimes in the wilderness, right? And that's a different vibe. This is an interesting article for me. That's like, okay, we're going to do AV over IP. We're going to do IP-based paging systems and, intercom systems. It's going to afford us opportunities to leverage technology and synergies and bring in AV and buzzwords. And I feel like there's areas where I don't want, AI and buzzwords. This is a very aggressive, adopt this new technology now because it'll make everything better. But given the entire industry is creeping its way into AV over IP, do you see any strong acceptance on this, especially from call centers and emergency operations centers and stuff like that?
I'm of two minds on this in that I certainly understand Heather's position that if the network fails, your mass notification could fail. I think that's a problem. But the opportunities, so the fellow that wrote the article does marketing for Bogan. I'm much more familiar with Atlas's products. Atlas has a great range of product that provide both visual information in school hallways, for example, and the paging that goes with that. And what the article did bring up that was of interest to me was the fact that it could be triggered not by a contact closure, but by something in a computer somewhere else, so that the automation, the messaging, it could come from a someplace far away rather than just locally. Where the limitations of the current systems are. The barrier to entry in clients that we've spoken with about this technology is really the cost, because these things are a lot more expensive than a traditional analog paging system, an awful lot more expensive. And folks go, well, in my school, do I really need all this latest technology? And certainly the school construction specifications we're seeing, most of them do not have it on a cost basis, not a technology risk basis.
So I just finished doing a class last week on network structuring and network load bearing stuff for our Pirate University here at CAVS. And what I find is a lot of clients, some of the IT directors want that ease of infrastructure. So it's 2, maybe 3 RJ, Cat 6 cables. They can talk to it directly. They can fine tune it. They're familiar with IP stuff. But if you're an AV contractor and your networking skills are basic, I want to say rudimentary, but if they're basic, understanding how to manage the loads across these managed switches, which these will require if you're going to do such an intense infrastructure, you have to be aware and know what you're doing with that, because you could muck it up and cause those outages, even though internally it shouldn't go out, right? I know, Brock, you mentioned if something goes out and or I think it was you, Brock. You're kind of worried about it, and the analog, as Heather said, doesn't go down. It just, unless it's fizzled out or it's burned, it's still working. So that was a lot of the discussion. Like, how do we make those loads work, especially when you're dealing with PoE type devices, which a lot of these will be, because nobody wants a wall wart in the wall and they want to hide them, right? So then you have to balance those loads over those switches because they're only given 52 volts over 24 ports. It becomes a far more complex install than throw a couple of lines of copper. It's fine. I still believe in it because I think the remote access to it and the abilities it gives you are beneficial.
There's a time and place. So you're starting in one building and building the system out over the course of 3 years, or AV over IP, and you're starting and you're going to grow this system to multiple areas of your campus. So there's a time and place for these things, but as a everyday beginning of this is how I would put this design together, I don't think that it's there yet. And I was going to say, except for water would stop it from working.
But only after a little while. It would still work for a while. We've seen that.
It would still work, yeah.
I do also think at this point, most schools, even here in St. Louis, by the time water gets in there, you're dealing with a catastrophic failure, and the students should hopefully already be out, since this kind of became a school conversation. I should also point out, to kind of amplify something Brock said, I've seen some of the systems that are going on, especially with AI doing analysis of video and security systems, and some of it is quite extraordinary and worth the time and effort to implement if you have the budget and the expertise to set it up and keep it running. So I even just having volume sensors, which is something, Atlas IED does a really good job on, where it actually is aware and can actually increase the volume if something loud and terrible is happening. That's something simple I think is really valuable, and there's a lot of stuff going on out like there. Pulling back from my keep it bone simple and like it's a 1950s vibe that I often portray. One last thought before we go. Residentialsystems.com. We're talking about CEDIA Expo 2024, smart stage programming, some other stuff going on there. IT, AV tech directors, George, Brock, Heather, what is the value of a CEDIA and the CI Expo for folks in the field? Are you excited about this? I mean, obviously none of you are there, so perhaps you're not that excited. But, how are you guys feeling about, programming going on at, I'll just open it up to any trade show, not just CEDIA and their work on CI Expo, to go from residential to commercial.
I think that the one thing that nobody did well during the pandemic was trade shows. And it is something you need to be there for. There is no YouTube video. There is no, I was going to say Vine. There is no.
Going way back.
That was a little late there. But there is no short, no Instagram that like compares to physically being there. Like I have never gone to a CEDIA, an Infocom, and not come away with something new. And it doesn't need to be even groundbreaking technology. Sometimes that new thing is I met and talked to an engineer. Sometimes that is when we were growing our commercial-based business. It was it was actually Rich Fregosa about programming, and he ended up helping me out on a programming job that was bigger than we were at the time. So there is, like, I don't think that anything will ever replace them. I think they might get smaller and maybe more specialized as companies continue to buy each other. But, seeing it in action, seeing what's possible, especially for me on the Infocom side, what I missed this year was the future thinking of what it could be. I feel that Infocom was tangible in what exists today. But yeah, I think that trade shows, I think they're extremely valuable for anyone who's a decision maker out there.
For AV and IT directors, so the article was referring to end users, to customers. I think going to a trade show is absolutely spectacular because it gives them a breadth of what's possible and what's out there. Way too many of the customers that we encounter, they're focused on one brand or one product. They do a little Google search. They think that they've done their research, and they don't have the kind of perspective, breadth of perspective that we in the industry do about all the options, all the solutions. Heck, there are problems they don't even know that they have, that walking the halls, they'll discover, like Oh, I never thought of that.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute. I think that it's great that as many kind of representatives of educational institutions, corporate users of AV go to these shows and regional shows. And I kind of look at the Commercial Integrator Expo that's occurring with CEDIA in Denver right now as being probably of great benefit to the folks in that region. I don't know how many national visitors they would have, but it would be fantastic for that area.
No, it always amazes me as somebody who's spent the better part of 2 decades going to CES, which was always insanely broad. I remember the first time going to one of these shows and being like, I can actually digest this. This actually allows me, but it's funny because I spent, much of my adult life finding the next new thing. And I'm always kind of amazed that people don't realize X or Y or Z exists. And at this point, after 20 years of this, I should be used to that. But, incredibly valid point, because people, and I'm not slighting anybody anywhere in any position, but if you don't do this 24/7, you don't realize, everything that's out there.
Yeah, I know in the beginning when they started doing this for both trade shows, there was some resistance from certain sector of dealers and distributors because the network and the way that we operated kept the information flow in a certain way that it wasn't denying clients an answer, but it was the answer we wanted to give them because that profit margin or that was better. And opening that up means, well, why didn't you tell me about XYZ company that does the same thing? Well, we're not dealers. Well, I want that. I don't want to spend this money. But in the end, I think it's been a much better process of saying, here's what the technology is, here's how we operate, here's why it works this way. And they're helping accelerate, again, the IP, IT integration of that because that's what they're centric from. So I thought it was really, especially when it was a Victor, but at CEDIA too, that you get that dialogue going where we're really getting the answers firsthand. And I think a lot of it was filtered in. Well, here's what the market wants. Is it really what they wanted or what the dealers wanted you to want them to want? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's also to call back to Heather, I've always been amazed at what I can find out by finding the engineer that nobody wants me to talk to that's hanging around in the booth.
Well, exactly, yes. That sums it up perfectly.
And not in a vicious way, but just in and they rattle off like it's a DNS configuration issue and it's known and here's the workaround for it. And, that's going to be fixed in the next evolution of the, and it's like, hold on, I got to write this down really fast. I've literally had that moment.
Well, it's the same reason some of the one of the manufacturers I worked for many years did not send certain engineers out to be talking with the public. For various and sundry reasons, they're engineers. They don't always speak English, or at least...
they just want to tell what works and what's right.
They're just talking technology, and it's like,
in.
whoa, just goes right over somebody's head because they go down. But also, there's foibles and faults that nobody wants to discuss. Like, well, here's how you work around that. I work around what?
Always challenging. Do you guys find, is it networking opportunities at your level who people are fairly familiar with more so than clients? Do you find that, the conversations in the hallway as valuable as the booth tours, or are they pretty equal?
Well, the people you run into, we live in an era where we get to crowdsource the real information about products. And to have a chance to run into some of my peers, ask a question about a product I've never used, and what their experience was with that product, and how difficult was that to actually get to do what we saw in the magazine or in the video, is invaluable. And it was, it harkens back to George talking earlier about being an early adopter of Twitter. And I was one of those people that signed on, and it gave access to a community that otherwise I would never be able to encounter or penetrate. To find somebody who worked for manufacturer X or Y and say, we're having this problem. Your customer service folks say, oh, nobody else is having that problem. And the engineer's like, well, actually, and by the way, here's a good fix while we solve that internally. And the community is fantastic. And you're there with your competitors, but the reality is that we often have way more in common with our competitors than we do with our clients. It can become an us versus them rather than it being a problem.
There was some resistance back then, wasn't there? Like on Twitter when we first started, people were not happy. Certain higher level people were like, why is everyone talking like this? Which is why when we started it, I was doing it from a manufacturer's side, begging forgiveness rather than asking permission because it was required. It was needed. And it was like, why are you yelling? They're happy now.
And it's why DMs worked so well.
Yeah.
Because there was no freaking way that people were going to respond in an open forum, even on Twitter, where their bosses would, had no idea existed. Like, talking about 2011 or 2012 or kind of in the dark ages. And frankly, George, I miss it because I am reticent to respond on LinkedIn as I used to be able to on Twitter. On LinkedIn, it's just it's too public. It's too broadly based, and you can't necessarily tell the truth.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn also has this very feral, very like sales oriented. I mean, I laugh because I get pitched for things. It's constant, and I'm just like, your bot needs some training because I am not a CEO. And I find it fascinating how, I get it's a business platform, but it's astonishing to me how many people just abuse it as a spamming platform to try to reach out. It's just like, as somebody who grew up in a family of salespeople, I'm like, this is the worst cold call, like you couldn't do this any worse if you tried, like, which is actually kind of an accomplishment if you think about it. It's interesting to watch. Threads is finally picking up speed. Mastodon fascinates me, but still feels like an open source project that wants to evolve. But it's, I can still remember one of the funniest conversations I ever had in the early Twitter days, where somebody was like, my CEO wants me to run all tweets by the PR team. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think he really understands the velocity at which Twitter moves. And he was like, nope, we're working on it, though.
Well, I had to present the CEOs of the company and the one owner with the Clue Train Manifesto dictums. If you don't know what that is, it's guys in Silicon Valley in the 80s and 90s who saw this coming and like, dude, you want to be part of the conversation. They're going to sniff out when you're being fake. Don't do it. You want me to sell more on there? I can sell more on there, but trust me, what they want is answers and kinship. And
yes,
they did. They eventually let us go. But yeah, I miss it too. But that's why I say come to Threads, come to Blue Sky. It's a better conversation there. Blue Sky is hard because you have to get an invite and it takes a little while, but it's pretty good. And Threads is fairly stable now. Not to make this the social show, but
it's a conversation worth having. I mean, I think everyone in the episode today has acknowledged that, Twitter in particular was a place that allowed them to open up communications and increase their knowledge and add value to, what they did every day. And it does not really service that anymore.
What's the Kink song? The dance hall is now a parking lot. Isn't there a line in one of those Kink songs that they turned the dance hall into a parking lot? That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, as somebody who used to spend a lot of time at CBGB's for a lot of years of my life, it fascinates me that it's an upscale retail clothing store, at least the last time I walked by. I was like, wait, is that an $8,000 pair of pants? Not that I have anything against $8,000 pairs of pants. If it's your vibe, go for it. But yeah, it's frustrating when something that you consider a useful tool gets broken. I don't think anybody can argue against that. George Tucker, Corporate Audio Visual Services, I say as I begin to wrap up the show. Where can people find more about you, what you're doing, and is the voting still going on for that Rolling Stone competition?
Well, okay, first things first. Corporate AV is at corporateav.com. We're here on Elmsford. You can find us on LinkedIn and all those other social platforms. I am Tucker Twos on every single social platform that exists, I believe, including Mastodon and all the rest of them. just hit me up there. I post a lot about music, a lot about weird books and stuff that I'm reading, and graffiti. My Instagram is all New York City graffiti stuff.
Are you taking those pictures?
Yes, those are my pictures. Yeah,
that's high
I don't
quality.
paint them, but I take them into Photoshop and I make them pop and edit and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for that. And then the one you're talking about is a friend of mine's band. Thank you for letting me promote that. Called Ridiculous Bitch. They are with a Rolling Stones competition. They're a New York City band that is a little funky, little metal, little punk, and they're doing some really good things.
Heather, thanks so much for joining us. Where can people find more about you and Southtown Audio Video?
Well, it's funny that you say that. You used to say Twitter, but not anymore. So Google me. I am out there, and I actually live a lot over in LinkedIn these days. So connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, and we'll play and talk and converse there. Thanks for having me. It was great to be back again.
Thank you so much for joining us today. George, Brock McGinnis, Nationwide Audiovisual, Toronto, Ontario, from north of the border. Do you ever have issues dealing with being in Canada and the size of the country and the kind of volume of business you do versus the United States? Your frustration there? Is that something we can talk about? Is that a DM? This is a DM question. Brock McGinnis, Nationwide Audiovisual, Toronto, Ontario. Where can people find you, what you do, and more about you?
I'm at nationwideav.com. I am on LinkedIn. I don't post anything nearly as interesting as George does because I'm just not that interesting a person. Mostly a business guy. But love this industry that we found ourselves in and all the various permutations of it. Love to see a company like Heather's, having evolved through a next generation in quite a small market in upstate Western New York. And for her to become as prominent in the industry and such a great voice. She might say she's a great voice for the women owner. I think she's a great voice for small business owner. And that still has a place as, so many AV companies have become gargantuan, private equity fueled something. Anyway, I'm love being here. Great to have you as our host today, and appreciate it.
Brock, thank you so much for dealing with me. And for those who are joining late, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, my setup was delayed today because my brand new pants from a reputable vendor, the zipper exploded. And I work out of a facility with a lot of people. And, there's an awkward moment when you're trying to get from one building to another and trying to find a jacket to cover yourself with when it's, St. Louis in the summer. Probably too much information there, but I will be coming in next week with a pile of safety pins, which I hope I never use because I will have them in my desk. I don't know. It's
Take
been
it from
an
a live events
interesting
person.
week.
Always have a spare set of everything in your backpack.
I am a Boy Scout who discovered 2 is 1, 1 is none. And yes, I was really fascinated and frustrated that I did not have anything I could jury rig my pants together with today. There's an AV tie in there that I'm not going to try to push because metaphors just get tortured. And I think I've tortured George and Brock and Heather enough today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Tim, Mr. Albright, for letting me host the show today. And he'll be back next week with all the good news from CEDIA and so much more. Thanks so very much. In 3, 2, thanks to everybody for listening. I'm Patrick Norton, and this is AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hi, this is Jennifer Goodyear
and Erica Carroll
from the Women in AV podcast, where we are encouraged by the incredible stories of women in AV.
Listen in on fun, empowering conversations as we chat with inspiring women, breaking barriers and creating their own path in the industry.
Check out Women in AV on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.